down from the state. They've passed a statewide recycling goal of 75% by 2030. Or I should say that's a county percentage that we need to meet by that date, which is I used to think that was a ways off. It's not so far off anymore. So I've got just a little brief timeline here of some effective dates that that schools need to pay attention to specifically. July 1, so earlier this month, is the first date on the timeline here. So the recycling requirements that I'm going to talk about have already kicked in for schools that were already recycled, or excuse me, required to recycle under the state's commercial recycling law, and that's the statute 115A 151. So that applies to public schools that generate 4 cubic yards or more trash per week, and those facilities were required to recycle, recycle at least 3 types of traditionally recyclable materials, like your glass, metal, plastic, paper, so on and so forth. So as of July 1, those schools that were affected there now have to meet the Dakota County recycling requirements, which expands those and specifies those materials. So they no longer just have to recycle the 3, they have to recycle the designated list, which we'll get to. And then January 1 of next year, then all other schools will be required to comply with these new requirements. So that's the small private schools, and again, any others that aren't already required as of July 1. And then January 1 of 2022, there's a requirement date there for our labels. There's some label requirements, again, we'll specify later, that and this one's a little goofy with the dates. So basically, dates that were purchased, containers that were purchased this year and beyond have to meet the label requirements now. The older containers that have been sitting around for a while, any purchased, 2019 or before, those don't have to meet the label requirements until January 1 of 2022. And then another big date in the future little ways, January 1 of 2023 is when some schools are required to collect organics. And again, we'll get into specifics on that down the road here. So we'll get into the the meat and potatoes here. So what are the recycling requirements? So basically, the school property owners and managers are responsible for complying with these recycle requirements. So again, not just the schools, but the owners and managers of the buildings that they may be in, also required. So the main one, of course, is provide recycling service. And that can be either contracting with a waste hauler or self-hauling recyclables. And then you need to ensure that you provide adequate capacity for recycling so that all the recyclables are captured and there's no overflow going into trash bins, things of that nature. And you must provide containers in buildings and on school grounds for the employees, students, visitors, anybody that's going to be using the facility will have the opportunity to recycle. So we've got this a defined designated list of recyclables now, and that is a list that can fluctuate based on the county board can make changes to that list, and then those changes are posted to the Dakota County website. So you can go there now and take a look, and it'll give you the list that's currently designated, and that there's no big surprises on that list. It's all your traditionally recyclable materials on there. I've thrown a couple examples on the slide here. And then going hand in hand with that is a designated list of contaminants that you're required to keep out of recycling containers. So that's, typically the, if you've ever heard the term wish cycling, where somebody's got a container or some sort of material and they say this is probably recyclable, and they chuck it in the bin. Well, a lot of times those aren't recyclable and act as a contaminant in the recycling stream, which affects the quality of the other recyclables in there. So we've kind of tried to identify some of those things to remove them from the stream and improve those recyclables. And again, some examples are batteries, shredded paper, and styrofoam. And then a big one, especially of note, is plastic bags. And that won't take effect until next year, where plastic bags are a designated contaminant. But that's a really big one, with how a lot of facilities function and how recyclables are captured in bins and things of that nature. They're the bin is lined with a bag, and then the bag is pulled out and thrown in the dumpster. Well, effective 2021, the bag will not be allowed to be put in the dumpster. They'll have to be kept. The recyclables have to be kept loose. So again, it's a kind of a big shift. I know a lot of how typically facilities run that operation. So then talking about containers, one of the big requirements is co-location of containers. So basically, anytime you have a trash container, you also have to have a recycling container nearby. And the picture on the slide is a great example. Of course, with it all connected, you're going to meet that requirement pretty easily. But of course, we don't all have money to go out and buy new containers, so we'll have to work with what we've got in a lot of cases. So if you've got separate trash and recycling containers, well, all you need to do is anytime you have one, you have to have the other. And we've got a definition in there of co-location, which is within 10 feet. And that's just a number for enforcement purposes. We have to define it somehow. Basically, we want them, again, paired, co-located, terms we use, meeting the spirit of, again, anytime there's a trash bin, there's also a recycling bin nearby, so that somebody doesn't have a plastic bottle and they want to get rid of it, and the only opportunity they have to do so is a trash bin with no recycling nearby. That's kind of the spirit of that.
John?
Yes.
We did have a question come in. What is the difference between shredded paper and paper? And I'm thinking that's with maybe co-location or collection. Any rules there?
Well, yeah, so the it comes down to if a lot of times shredded paper or maybe in a confidential document box, and things of that nature, or somebody may have a shredder at their desk, to take care of that stuff individually. But essentially, because it gets shredded up into a million pieces, that gums up the works for the rest of the recyclables when we're the majority of recyclables are going single sort or mixed together. So if you've got your office paper, a printed sheet of paper, if it's not shredded, you can put it in the recycling bin with the other recyclables. But if it is shredded, then it needs to be kept separate. There are businesses out there that will specifically recycle shredded paper. So that's basically just it's a recyclable, still a recyclable material, just needs to be kept separate from the regular mixed recycle single sort stream, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think that should do it.
Good deal. All right. So, and then the recycling containers that you provide, they have to be large enough, again, to prevent overflow. So if you've got a high use area, with just a small container that's constantly getting filled up. And again, I got this plastic bottle. I want to recycle. Recycling bin's full, so it goes in the trash. So we need to prevent that. Keep an eye on those containers, again, the high use areas, making sure that all the recyclables that are being generated at your facility are captured. All right, and then we get into labels. So again, refer back to the timeline slide on the kind of goofy nature of when what container needs to be labeled, but all the recycling, all the trash, all the organics containers, anywhere at the facility are required to be labeled according to the county labeling standards. And that is actually super easy, thanks to our friends in the Dakota County Environmental Initiatives Group. They've got wonderful resources that you can go and actually request and order free labels to use on your containers. And I've got a link to that order form later at the end of the presentation. So basically, there's a number of criteria, but main one is color coded. So that's blue for recycling, gray or black for trash, and then green for organics. And there's, excuse me, the recycling and organics labels must include images of what's accepted and instructions where applicable. So you see on this slide an example of the recycling label. So it says what it is: paper, cardboard, cartons, cans, glass, plastics, etc. And then you get the pictures of those corresponding items. And at the very bottom is the instructions. Sweet, simple, empty liquids, no food. So the for the milk container, for example, the rest of the milk needs to be poured out. It doesn't have to be rinsed. It doesn't have to be washed out. But just emptied of the liquid and or food, and then thrown in. And then some more recycle requirements about labels. They have to be readable, have to be legible. So if they become unreadable, become damaged, illegible, etc., they need to be replaced. And one nice thing about these requirements is waste haulers are affected as well. So if you contract with a waste hauler to provide containers for your facility, those containers that they provide, they're responsible for labeling. So only ones that the schools own themselves are ones that you need to worry about labeling. And again, as I mentioned, the schools can request free container labels and even some posters and activity guides from the county. Helpful resources come in handy for labels, and also some education requirements that again we'll get to here on the next slide. So the schools the schools are required to provide recycling education to basically anybody that's going to be in the facility on a regular basis. So that's your employees, students, food service workers, custodial staff, housekeeping, and contractors. So you need to provide that education once per year, or within 30 days of a new hire or new student, and within 30 days of a major change to the recycling program. And that would be if for some reason you increase recycling, you start recycling this particular item, that would be considered a major change to the program. And then there's an annual report requirement as well. So the county will provide an annual report form. We're working on that right now. The first reporting period, of course, will be this year for those schools that are required to comply as of July 1. So it'll be hopefully a fairly simple form to fill out. Basically, we want you to report on how effective your recycling program is, what challenges you've had. You know, basically it's information that we're trying to gather so that we can improve our programs, our services to help generators recycle as best they can. And then another item on the education. Again, we've got county resources to help with that. It doesn't have to be a 3-day course. You know, it's basically just you're providing that information, whether it's in the school newsletter, again, posters around the school, you know, brought up in an assembly, something of that nature. But we ask that, of course, that's documented as well, so we can document compliance. All right, so next we kind of get into, excuse me, organics. So the organics section here in my presentation, I've kind of condensed down for a couple reasons. One being, you know, it's still a couple years off when the actual requirements will kick in, and secondly, with the effect that, you know, the COVID has had on how schools have operated, grinding everything to a halt for the most part, and getting started back up, I know there's going to be a lot of fluctuation, a lot of uncertainty on how this is going to look in the future. So, of course, these regulations were passed prior to COVID-19. So as they're written, by January 1, 2023, schools that meet these 3 criteria are required to collect food scraps. Or when we say organics in the ordinance, it's actually defined as food scraps. So, you know, that's your again, the helpful label shows, you know, your leftover sandwiches and chicken wings and things of that nature. So those schools that meet that criteria are schools, colleges, and universities with dining services. So I think, you know, typically most of your typical public schools. You also need to generate at least 1 ton or contract for at least 8 cubic yards of waste per week. And then also needs to be generating food scraps in a back of house operations. So that, of course, means that your the dining services, the folks that are back there preparing food for students, that the food scrap waste that they generate there, which different from front of house, which would be the bins that the kids drop off or clean off at the end of their meals. And the organics requirements in general are pretty much the same as the recycling requirements I went through. Again, I've just kind of condensed them into one slide here because again, they're very similar, just applying to organics or food scraps. So again, after January 1, 2023, those schools need to provide the collection service and the containers to capture those organics, those food scraps. And we've also got a designated list of those on our county website as well. And same thing about capacity, make sure that all the food scraps you're generating are being captured and there's not extra going to trash. Those labels need to be, those containers need to be labeled like everything else. And I had, again, an example on the previous slide. Organics, it's the color green. Same thing about what's accepted, instructions and pictures, so on and so forth. And then that education piece also applies to these organics. So again, once these requirements kick in, you'll already be doing the recycling education. You can just tag on the organics or food scrap education onto the end of that. And then again, reporting as well, same deal. Once the requirements kick in, we'll have a piece on there about organics for you to report on as well. And that is all I had for content here. This is a should be a really helpful slide for folks. We've got our school recycling requirements at the county website, um, detail on label standards, the school order form for those free resources to help, and then the list of recyclables and the list of organics for you to reference as you go along and comply. And I'm told there's even more, education resources that are being developed. So, you can either check back with the websites or reach out to Allie for updates on those. But that is all I had for you. Are there any other questions?
We did get a question come in that says, what about paper towels on the organics?
Paper towels on the organics. That is a good question.
I could maybe field that. What about the paper towels on the organics? Just if they're acceptable, or if they'll be required to collect. Because I think just what John was sharing for the ordinance, for organics, it's just back of house that will be required, and it's food scraps only that will be required. If you'd like to do paper towels collection, as long as composting facilities continue to take paper towels, then those could also be put in the organics dumpster. Does that somewhat answer the question?
Yes, Cheryl wondered if they are accepted, so maybe not required.
Okay, yes. Right now, to my knowledge, they are accepted, but not required. And also I had another question come in from Kim. So Kim had asked, I know this is all specific for the ordinance to Dakota County, but do many of the same things apply to most Minnesota counties?
Hennepin County has a similar requirements. I think they're a little bit more focused as far as their scope. I know that they have been working with commercial, restaurants and things of that nature on organics collection. But it's pretty progressive as far as these recycling and organics requirements go. So we've done some research with other cities around the cities and counties around the country, and there's not a lot out there as far as this, but there are some. But as far as in Minnesota, no, this is we're kind of leading the edge here.
Yeah, it's exciting because I think we really are. And I know Kim said her kids are in Washington County, so there is not language in their ordinance for schools in Washington County at this point. Is that correct, John?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
We're special.
Yay. And then I just saw Carla had asked, organics are only required from kitchen prep and not student food waste. That is correct.
Yes.
Back of house only.
Yes, back of house only, absolutely. And that is a big distinction. And I know and I'm not super familiar with it, so forgive me if something's incorrect. But I know a lot of the focus so far on organics, capturing that material from schools, has been on front of house, and I know it's been a source of contamination. Of course, it's tough, to get kids to do anything, let alone put the proper organics in the bins. So the requirements only apply to back of house. So essentially, if really bottom line is, if it's easier to relax those front of house things and focus on the back of house, that's going to meet the regulation, and I think that's going to again improve. You're going to capture more quantity that way. You're going to have less contamination, and it'd be overall probably a better way to do it.
And I'll say too, for those, I know a majority of our schools do have front of house organics, or front of house meaning in the cafeteria for the public, for students, for staff. It might be feasible, or at some point better, if you're having contamination issues, to start going to food only or food and napkins only instead of compostable products. That can really help reduce the contamination. And if you say food only to students, that's a lot maybe easier to grasp. And just starting back with the basics than trying to overwhelm the system, because as John was saying, it's better to kind of get quality material than maybe everything, but it gets rejected. So thanks, John.
You bet. Thanks everybody for your time.
Yes. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly. This works. So I'm going to talk about just a piece of what John was speaking about in the ordinance, bagless recycling. And so bags not being allowed. Ooh, here we go. See if this works. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So as John mentioned, plastic bags are listed on the designated list of contaminants, and eliminating bags from recycling dumpsters and or carts. Does it say my screen sharing's paused for anybody else? Can everybody see this?
We see the the welcoming slide, the agenda slide.
Oh, uh-oh.
Maybe you'll have to reshare probably.
Okay, let me try that again. Sorry, everyone. Okay, how about now?
There we go, perfect.
Okay, great. So again, plastic bags are on the designated list of contaminants, and eliminating bags from recycling dumpsters and or carts isn't just for Dakota County. Haulers and recycling facilities across the nation are actually communicating this to customers. Our ordinance for Dakota County just establishes a standardized time frame for it to take effect for us countywide, and that's January 1st, 2021. So it's coming up here shortly, and that's across our county. So all businesses, county city buildings as well are affected, not just schools. So my hope is we can continue working together to shape best practices, but I wanted to share with you just a few potential strategies and solutions I've seen thus far for eliminating bags in the recycling dumpster. Let's see if I can go. Okay, so we're going to start with a poll. So is your building currently bagless, meaning putting recyclables in the recycling dumpster loose with no plastic bags? And Jenny will launch that poll. And yeah.
Allie, can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Yeah, definitely, Marcy.
So with this bagless idea, is it the idea still that there would be bags in like the recycling containers and then custodial staff would have to like get rid of the bag before it goes into the big dumpster, or that we would just go away from using the bags entirely?
Yes, it can be either. So that's a really good lead in, actually. It's a really good question. I'm going to talk about some of the different collection methods I've seen in schools, but the only part that is ordinance related is that bags can't go in the recycling dumpster.
Sure.
What you do in your bins in your school to collect is of your own choice. So good question. So bagless, it looks like most people right now, or most schools or school buildings are not bagless, which we weren't at our county facilities until recently either. And we have one more poll question that I'm just curious to learn about. So when it comes to bagless recycling, what are you most concerned with? So are you concerned with the cleanliness of recycling bins in the school? Concerned with the cleanliness of the recycling dumpster itself? Items blowing out of the dumpster? Maybe increased staff time or hauling contract issues? Or do you not have any concerns? And if you have something that's not listed, you can put it in the chat box. So our main concern looks like the recycling bins, the cleanliness of those in the school. So there are a lot of strategies to address that, and we'll talk about that now. So first, why does it matter if plastic bags go in the recycling dumpster? Kind of why do we care? Though most haulers have allowed a few large clear bags into the recycling dumpster in the past, plastic bags have always been a problem at recycling sorting facilities. Because when our recyclables arrive at these facilities, they go through a sorting process that depends on both humans and machines. Our recyclables must be loose in order to make it through the sorting equipment. And with a bag full of recyclables, sorters have had to try to open these bags, which has the potential to introduce more contaminants into the sort line. They also have to deal with these bags and might miss other more damaging contaminants as well. And it creates some unsafe and unsanitary working conditions for employees, as their safety might be at risk if one of the bagged materials that they thought was recyclables opens up and instead it's medical, hazardous waste, or sharp objects like needles. So I wanted to show you this video to just show you just a sense of how fast the sort line is moving and how quickly sorters must try to pull out these contaminants.
Christmas lights.
Water hoses that stop the stars from spinning around. And anytime we get jammed, the whole system shut down. Right now, as you can see, everything is shut down because we have to clean the machine.
There's a lot of plastic bags that we get through the system. Grocery bags, bags filled with leaves, that's also get caught up in the screen.
Screen cleaning is when we go inside the screen and we take out the unwanted material, old clothing, old shoes, metal material.
When we go inside the screens, you might have a pole sticking out the shaft. We have to pry it out. Or we might have cords that's wrapped around 3 shafts, or ropes, or chains, and we have to use the tool to get those things out. The tools we have is a hook knife, some wire cutters, and some pliers.
6 times a day, we stop the machines to clean for contamination.
Well, it would probably take us up to 2 hours to clean the screen out when recycling is not done properly.
We try to clean the screen 100% so it can run smooth as possible without causing any jam.
Now that I work here at Waste Management, I tell my friend that recycling is really important. If more people would recycle right, we could process more recycling a day.
Slides. Plastic bags get wrapped around and tangled in that sorting equipment. And when this happens, all the equipment must be shut down so that workers can climb into the machinery and manually cut out plastic bags out of gears and screens. And at most recycling facilities, they actually have to stop the line every 2 hours to cut the bags off equipment. So obviously it's a safety risk for workers that damages that equipment, and it also makes recycling inefficient and costly as there's more downtime and therefore increased costs. So plastic bags, they can increase contamination because the plastic bags are wrapped around the screens. And so when those screens are wrapped, other contaminants might seep through, and also the machinery can't work properly to actually sort recyclables, which makes the materials less valuable overall. So we know we rely on both domestic and overseas markets, and our percent allowable contamination for recycling has been drastically reduced to try to eliminate some of the trash in recycling, which causes recycling facilities to increase processing costs, to remove contaminants, and in order to keep recycling kind of viable long-term and have strong markets while keeping the cost down, our quality of recyclables has to improve, which means decreasing contamination. So making an adjustment to eliminate the plastic bags in recycling dumpsters so they don't end up at the recycling facilities, and therefore then increase the costs for everyone because of the inability to reduce contamination and have clean recyclables. So that's why, kind of the reasoning behind why plastic bags, both loose plastic bags and bagged recyclables, can't be placed into recycling carts or dumpsters for recycling collection. Okay, so our goal here is to get back to the basics. We want to help educate students and staff to remember these rules each time they put something in the recycling container. So of course, keeping plastic bags and bagged recyclables out of the recycling dumpster cart, that's more a staff custodial role, but not bagging recyclables. They don't have to be loose in the bin. By bin here, I mean hauler supply dumpster cart. We'll talk about some methods for collection. But if you do collect your recyclables in a bag, making sure to empty them directly into the dumpster cart loose is what's important. Not having loose plastic bags, keeping food and liquids out of the recycling, and making sure to recycle only empty bottles, cans, paper, cardboard, and cartons. And also batteries. It's also on the bottom of our dumpster labels. They cause fires at recycling facilities. So we really want to make sure we're not putting batteries in the recycling, and we're collecting and disposing of them separately from trash and recycling. Okay, so at this point, I was going to have Randy, who's the night lead at Cherry View Elementary, speak, but I just got a last minute email from her that she had an emergency arise and unfortunately wasn't able to join us this morning. But a few of the things that she shared with me about her recycling collection and disposal process. Randy's been with Cherry View Elementary for 5 years and does the collection at night with several of her colleagues. So she shared with me that she actually dumps all her recycling into an unlined collection barrel, so without a bag, and puts that into the dumpster directly, rinsing out the collection barrels if there was liquids or other nasty things that was in the recycling. Her colleague actually collects recycling in a different way. He prefers to bag the collection barrels and then dumps the materials in loose and then reuses that bag for trash collection, and eventually will throw that bag away. But he didn't want to worry about rinsing barrels, so they have different methods in the same school. They've been told by their driver for years that they couldn't put plastic bags in the recycling dumpster, and she said that varies by schools in her district. Some schools in her district are still able to do so for whatever reason. But her driver's been specific, so they've been doing that for several years already. And none of their classroom recycling is currently bagged, but she mentioned she was going to start bagging classroom recycling bins, but she will continue to dump her classroom recycling bins into an unlined collection barrel. So that's some insight from Randy. And her contact information will be at the end of the presentation too, if you'd like to reach out to her directly for more information. So do you use plastic bags as liners in your school recycling containers? That piece is really up to you and what works best for your school. Ideally, it's best not to use bags if you can avoid it, both financially for you and environmentally. Not lining recycling containers means, though, that only clean and dry materials can be recycled for the bin to remain clean. So perhaps the only container in the school you do want to line are the ones where milk cartons will be collected, such as in the cafeteria. Some schools don't line any recycling containers, even in the cafeteria, and instead rinse out dirty recycling containers using water, because even with cartons, even if the liquids are dumped out, there's still going to be a few drops that get into the collection container. If it's not possible to eliminate bags completely, some schools only use bags in recycling containers in high-use areas where liquids are an issue. So that might be somewhere like a hallway or a cafeteria, as I mentioned. But they leave recycling containers unlined in lower-use areas or areas with a small chance of liquids. So that would be an area like an office setting. Depending on if students eat breakfast in the classroom, that might help determine if classroom containers are lined with a plastic bag. And it also depends on where breakfast waste is disposed of. So is it in classroom containers or is it in a hallway collection system? Lastly, schools can also choose to line all recycling containers with plastic bags, but the bags will need to be disposed of during the collection process. And it's best to change the bags out only when they're dirty to save on bags and therefore on costs. It's a best practice to use clear bags for recycling and black bags for trash if you're lining the containers. All right, so some recycling collection methods. So for collection, if you're using barrels, we recommend tandem dollies, and that's that upper left picture. So you'll see those work really well to collect trash and recycling at the same time separately, with trash on one side, recycling on the other. It's important that the barrels are color-coded and labeled so it's clear to students and staff that materials are separated. We learned just with working with schools over the years that even if trash, some schools might collect trash and recycling in gray barrels, even though they're being separated out into separate streams at the dumpster, or a large tilt truck with all the bags together being separated at the dumpster. But the perception then to students and staff is that their sorting actions don't matter, or it all goes to the same place, even though that might not be true. So when collecting the material, it's best to make sure it's visually obvious to everyone where the material is going. You can dump smaller recycling containers, their contents loose, into the larger collection container. If bags are used in the classroom or other recycling containers, bags should be changed out only when they're dirty. And if they're clean and dry, they don't need to be replaced. And individual bags, once they are dirty, must go in the trash. So that recycling collection cart itself can use a bag or no bag. As we learned from Randy, both methods might be used in the same exact school, depending on the person. If a bag is used in the recycling collection container, it's best to leave the bag untied so you don't have to cut open the bags at the dumpster, and to dump recycling loose directly into the dumpster out of the bag. So custodial staff using this method tend to just hold on to the bottom of the bag as they're dumping to keep the bag from going into the recycling dumpster, as shown in that top right photo. And the other method shown kind of in that bottom photo with the barrel up in the air is a method of dumping the container itself. It's not very ergonomic, if you have to lift that overhead, and it might be best to dump the bag and not dump the whole container if possible. You could also consider using smaller collection containers or making more frequent trips to the dumpster if you're using this method or bags are too heavy. A loading dock or barrel lift system can also be a great solution for that. And if a bag was used in the recycling collection, or if a bag was not used in the recycling collection container, you might want to consider rinsing the barrels out after use. So one tool to help with emptying containers and bags in the recycling dumpster, if you want to have a support to keep that lid open and convenient, can be a dumpster prop tool. So Dakota County is actually piloting the dumpster prop pictured in this photo to assist in keeping the dumpster lid open while staff dump the bag of recyclables loosely into the dumpster. The photo kind of shows the dumpster prop tool in action. That's at Westcott Library in Eagan. And the video in this link you can watch later if you'd like to kind of see it in action. It's mostly just them using it to pull open the lid. Before purchasing a dumpster prop tool, I'd also consider requesting assisted dumpster lids from your hauler, which stay open on their own. So that's that right photo. Just don't forget to close them to keep recycling clean and dry. And that type of lid, I've only seen metal lids like that have the ability to stay open on their own, not plastic, but I know they are out there. Another way to empty the collection brooder cart into the recycling dumpster is using a cart lifter. So these are all links you can watch later on your own. The one thing I did want to show you is the Eagle Lift because it was new to me. So I'll pull up that video really quickly right now. Thought that was pretty cool to see that because I've seen these hydraulic bin lifters that's with the red cart pictured, but I hadn't seen that one that's, you know, manual lift, and it actually is a lot cheaper than those hydraulic bin lifters. So that might be a good option if that would work for your school. It was actually invented by a welder for a school district out in California that invented it after speaking with district custodians to kind of help prevent injuries for staff, but also improve employee satisfaction. And I know that that was designed with the intention to be used with a 32 to 44 gallon brute container, but I also saw a video online of it being used for a cart as well. So it can be used on wheels as a dolly to transport, or it can remain attached to the dumpster. And then for the cart tippers, in some cases, if schools are utilizing these cart tippers, where they're picking it up and dumping it into the recycling dumpster unlined, you might want to consider having rubber bands around the top of the container to prevent the bag from falling into the dumpster if your container for collection is lined. So Toter obviously is a vendor I'm aware of that makes these mobile cart lifters as well. And those links are available for you if you'd like to explore them. And then just one other note, that blue cart, it might be an ideal system. I know one district uses those carts in kind of a communal centralized hallway or pod location where students empty their own classroom recycling containers into the larger container loose, and then they roll those carts to then be used in their bin lifter at the school, directly dumping into the recycling dumpster loose. So those are some options for you. Also, if you're interested in the cart tippers, one more thing, these are eligible in our school waste prevention recycling grant program, and you'll want to rinse the cart to keep it as clean as possible if you aren't lining. So in order to be able to rinse the cart, you might be considering like a barrel washing system. I'm not going to play the video right now because just for time purposes, but Drum Beaters of America is a company I've learned creates these systems. All of these are links so you can see kind of it in action. but it just requires a 120-volt wall outlet and a source of water. And it was actually developed for schools to kind of clean out containers. The person I've spoke with, his contact information is here. And I know Canterbury Park actually recently just got a bin washer to clean bins instead of using bags. And the cost was around $4,500 for them. They have all different models though, so it might be different for you depending on your needs. So, and I know even some of their models don't require a water source. And he said for some of their electric units, they only need a typical plug-in. So I would reach out if this is something you're interested in. There's also lease to own options for purchasing as well. And these are also eligible in our School Waste Prevention Recycling Grant Program. So lastly, I just wanted to, no bag is ideal, but if you want to use a bag and you wanted to explore is using a bag instead of plastic possible, I just wanted to briefly explore a few alternatives. So 2 types of reusable bags are either the Tyvek bag for $6 each or a mesh laundry bag for $3 each. Obviously, reusable bags require cleaning of some sort in the washing machine or otherwise, but reusable bags are the only option that can be used over and over again, even once it's removed from the container. Obviously, the paper and plastic bags can be used again, but if they're dirty, once soiled, a new bag is needed. So liquids would still be able to seep through the mesh reusable bags, so that wouldn't prevent that issue. But they're the most upfront costs of these 4 options, but if you're able to use it over and over again to eliminate the need to purchase new bags every time, they have the potential to save you money. And obviously reusable bags as well as paper bags may be far more limited in different sized bags. Paper bags for approximately $1 a bag are unique as the only bag to be able to be used in the recycling dumpster and actually put in the dumpster with the materials. But if liquids are present, they'll likely rip and they're unusable once dirty. And then plastic bags is the cheapest option, but we know they can't go in the dumpster anymore and they're unusable once they're soiled unless they're used again or repurposed for collection. So if you're going to be using plastic bags, just make sure you're collecting untied so you don't need to cut them open at the dumpster. And Revolution Bag, who presented at our workshop a few years ago in the past, they actually have a greener plastic bag that's made from 70% recycled agricultural plastic. So if you're looking for a greener option, but you're still using plastic bags, that might be something you'd like to consider. I know one district in our county that made the switch to Revolution Bag actually saved 25% on their costs compared to their previous bag vendor. So that was a cool success. And education is going to be key and more important than ever to keep our liquids and other contaminants out of the recycling. So we really want to make sure we're engaging with students and staff in our new process to make sure it's successful and have them be able to help provide us with support as well. So no matter what your collection method ends up being in your school, communicating with students and staff if you notice food, if you notice liquids or other non-accepted materials that's routinely ending up in the recycling is really important. So your school can provide additional training or education to reduce recycling contamination. Your hauler might also have resources they can provide, such as emails to staff, frequent announcements to students. They have different resources and templates for employee emails and handouts as well. So just assisting with that education that plastic bags can't go in the recycling dumpster. And in our ordinance, haulers are required to label dumpsters. You're required to label bins inside your school and your school bins outside, not the dumpsters or carts. And then Dakota County's new dumpster labels, which are pictured here, they have recycling reminders on the bottom. So not to bag recyclables, to keep out food and liquids. That other label you see, the no plastic bags, that was actually created for our multifamily recycling program in a 4x4 or 8x8 size. But there's also a large 24-inch size or that could go on the wall above dumpsters, or we can create it in a size that works for you. So this is also available to schools upon request if that would be useful. And so wrapping up, we know there's several challenges to going bagless and recycling dumpsters that we'll need to continue to work through together. Figuring out how staff will dump recycling loose. Maybe that means not lining recycling collection containers, hanging on to the plastic bag when you empty. maybe a new cart tipper or barrel washing system, or piling a new bag for collection completely. The height of staff might also play a role if they threw bags previously into the recycling dumpster, but now need to hang on to the bag to empty it. Depending on your previous method, it might take more staff time to collect recycling if you're using smaller collection containers with more frequent trips to the dumpster, or you have the inability to stack bags as high if you're collecting by different material types. So just might also be a change in time spent. So maybe instead of lining as many recycling containers with plastic bags throughout the school, instead you're using that time to rinse out collection barrels. Know your custodial contract requirements, as you might need to increase labor hours or roles and tasks. But we're hoping that over time, those additional labor hours will decrease as employees make adjustments and figure out the workflow and kind of the new norm with bagless recycling. Also, I've heard from schools just the litter issue, that recyclables more frequently fly out of dumpsters, especially when it's being emptied if recyclables aren't in bags. So some potential solutions for that, ensuring obviously that you have a lid on your recycling dumpster, though it seems that the issue arises the most when it's actually being emptied by the hauler on a windy day. So you might want to make sure it's included in your hauler contract that it's their responsibility to clean up materials if they do blow out. Liquids also from unbagged milk cartons can cause the recycling dumpster and recycling containers to start to smell. So for recycling containers in the school, there's several solutions we've already discussed. So you could rinse out or line containers. This photo on the slide actually shows lined collection containers with a plastic bag, but they're pinning it on with a bike tire to kind of stay solid and not fall into the dumpster when they use their cart tipper. And they swap out the bags each time they're emptied. So local bike shops actually have supplied these to schools, these inner tubes to use for free. And you can use those and repurpose the bag on the cart. For dumpster sanitary issues, loose milk cartons outside of large plastic bags, obviously some liquids might get into the dumpster. So a potential solution might be including tips for students on like tapping the carton to ensure it's as empty as possible before recycling in the cafeteria. It's also going to be important to consider language in your hauler contract on how to address this as well. So maybe you could ask your hauler, what is the frequency that dumpsters can be switched out and or cleaned? And then lastly, just opportunities. So we know that we have challenges, but there's also several opportunities or benefits to reducing or eliminating the use of plastic bags. You can save money on bags. Even if your school still plans to line recycling containers and throw the bag away, can you implement the practice of only changing bags when they're dirty, or only lining containers in high traffic areas with the potential for food and liquids? That can reduce any additional costs from added staff time or maybe help break even as well. And you can also reduce hauler contamination fees. So several schools have received increased fees on their hauler invoices for processing the contamination. So when you keep plastic bags out, you're eliminating those fees. And you can also double check, make sure you're double checking your invoices and staying in communication with your hauler on that. And then just improving back safety and ergonomics for staff to reduce potential injuries, maybe using a cart lifter, loading dock, and reducing the weight in recycling bags when you're getting out any liquids. And also reducing the amount of waste created. So we know we're creating waste with the plastic bags and throwing those away, but we're also saving the resources it took to make the plastic bags. And making sure you're working on your hauler contract language if that's applicable for the issue of if recyclables blow out of the dumpster, or odors, addressing odors from liquids in the dumpster. And that will potentially reduce the amount of work on school staff on all fronts. And lastly, this helps keep recycling markets strong because we know 80% of all recyclables ship to domestic markets. So we want to make sure those recyclables have low contamination and make sure we're helping keep our recyclables valuable. All right, let's continue to work together to keep recycling loose or starting to collect or putting in dumpsters with no bags to keep recycling kind of clean and dry and emptying out all food and liquids before recycling. So if you need support or an extra brain to help problem solve this at your school, or you want more information on any of the resources I've talked about, feel free, please reach out contact me. And yeah, I'll take a few questions. I know tighter on time, but if you have additional questions later, feel free to email me and I'll get back to you as well.
We had 2 questions, Allie. One, can you talk about if bottles with liquids go into the recycling and then you might see them later as you're emptying out, what should you do? Should you throw that whole bag away? Should you empty bottles?
Right. That's a tough question. So you miss the education. The education isn't there because you're just doing the collecting, it sounds like. So you're just seeing a full plastic bottle. And it's not custodial. We're never going to ask custodial staff to be waste sorters. That's not their role or their job. So if you see, at the recycling facilities, they have a percentage of recycling contamination they're able to accept. So if you see a bag and maybe there's one thing that's a contaminant, I would just proceed. But if you see, this whole bag is full of liquids and other materials, firstly, we're going to need to improve the education there so it doesn't keep happening. But that would be your call on if you're going to put that bag in the trash or do with it otherwise. I would say if it seems like the majority of the bag is contamination, it would need to be trashed. But I also don't want someone making the call based on one contaminant in a recycling stream and therefore everything's trash. That's not the direction we want to go either. So let's talk more if that person who had that question wants to reach out. I think that's a really good thing to kind of think through and maybe some of our guidance on what we're doing for collection and kind of what our practices are for that. But that's kind of a tough one.
Great. And then Marcy asked, when does the bag ban go into effect?
Yeah, so that's January 1st, 2021. So right away next year. Okay. Well, great. Our next speaker is Renee Landau. She's the co-founder of GOATOTE, and she's here to discuss reusable breakfast bags. So let's welcome Renee. And Renee, I think if you're able to share your screen.
All right.
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Thank you for the introduction, Allie, and thanks for having me speak. I do see some familiar faces, so that's always nice. As you said, my name is Renee. My husband, Chad, and I are the founders of GOATOTE. We are a reusable bag company. So I'm going to kind of be talking about our retail division. I'll just kind of skim through that. Then what we did with schools last year and reusable bags, and then a little bit about COVID-19 and reuse companies. So first off, what is a GOATOTE? So as much as I am an animal lover, our company doesn't actually have anything to do with goats. It actually comes from any of you sports fans out there will know the acronym, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. So we decided to make a system that is the greatest of all time tote. So my family and I, we moved to St. Paul in October. We came from Southern California, which is where we started our company. And like I said, we are a reusable bag system. We support retail, education, and online shopping models. And the reason why we came to this area is we had the opportunity to pilot with St. Paul Public Schools. That also opened the door to a pilot program with Heritage ESTEM in Dakota County. And we finished that up in March of 2020. It would have extended to the end of the school year, but with COVID and everything shutting down, that was our ending point. And then we are actually also really happy to announce that at the end of this month, we will be launching one of our retail kiosks at Valley Natural Foods Co-op in Burnsville. So Dakota County all the way. We're very excited. So I'll tell you a little bit about why GOATOTE was created. So when we first came out with the company, we only thought retail. Where we lived was, they have a ban on plastic bags since 2011. And as you can see by my graph, bans on bags are rising, and like Allie just even spoke about, bans on bags in schools and businesses as well. So some of the things that we felt were hurting the long-term sustainability on these bag bans was that people inevitably forget their bags. So we've had the ban since 2011, and we still forget our bags. People do not like paying for bags. So if you are unfamiliar with bag bans in a retail setting, if you do not bring a reusable bag, you have to pay, it's usually about 10 to 15 cents for a paper bag or a thicker plastic bag that they consider reusable. And I like to say that I will put a chicken in my purse before I will pay for a bag, because there's just something about that just gets me the wrong way. I do not want to have to pay for a bag. And then, which is more prevalent than ever before, is the cleanliness and cross-contamination. We always saw an issue with people bringing their own reusable bags, and now more than ever, we know why. And then again, also, it's a hard transitional period for communities that are used to receiving a bag, and then suddenly, one day you no longer get that bag, and there not being any systems in place to kind of help alleviate some of that change. We saw our program as a good opportunity as well. So this is basically how the system works in retail. So you download the mobile application and you become a member. You go to a participating GOATOTE store. You unlock that kiosk with your mobile application. You take your bags. You return the bags within 30 days. You are able to check out additional bags within that 30 days, and you will receive reminders based on your preferences that you set up when you downloaded the app of when your bags need to be returned. We wash and disinfect bags. They are then quality checked and restocked for reuse. So we really saw an opportunity to do what reusable bags are made to do, and that is reuse them. I'm sure many people have a lot of reusable bags. I had a closet full, and I don't think that they were reused to as much as they should have been to really get the benefit of them. So as I kind of mentioned, that we just completed the pilot program with St. Paul Public Schools and with Heritage ESTEM. So basically, we were brought in by St. Paul Public Schools to help alleviate their single-use plastic bag for their breakfast program. So, we all know how great of a program Breakfast in the Classroom is, how many students are fed, and the positive results that come from that. What I had no idea was the amount of single-use plastic bags that were used in breakfast. So these come from St. Paul Public Schools report that they put out last year. So as you can see, that they use 4,208,000 single-use breakfast bags. Now I know that they are a big district, but that is a lot of bags to be used for probably 20 minutes and then thrown in the trash. And it was a pretty big cost for them, over $139,000 when you include the cost of the bags and the hauling fees and all of that. So they were looking for a sustainable solution, and they had heard about our program, and we said, well, I think that we can adapt that to a school setting. And so we agreed on a pilot for this year. We did not use a mobile application. It was essentially, we dropped off bags. Each school determined how and where the bags were distributed. pretty much identical to how they distribute the single-use plastic bags. And then we picked up the bags and laundered them and then, you know, returned them for reuse. I would say that the pilot was very successful. I think from the feedback that I was given, that students enjoyed the program. They took ownership in doing this and doing it the right way. And for us, for success is, you know, did the bags come back? Were we able to use them? And yes, so we had about a 97% return rate. Any bags that were unusable, again, that was kind of like just like a learn thing. Some bags were not picked up in time, so they actually did get moldy. And so again, that was just a learning opportunity for us. So, you know, you could probably take a 0.5% and add that back to the return rate. So I have here 4 schools saved over 15,000 single-use bags in just 4 months. So because it takes more energy and more material to create a reusable bag than a single-use plastic bag, you have to use a reusable bag about 11 times before it starts just taking the place that 1-to-1 ratio. So as of the 12th time that reusable bag is used, so in this case, you know, once it's used, you know, in 2.5 weeks, then it will take that 1-to-1 ratio and replace a single-use plastic bag every time. The pilot taught us a lot about the habits of students. We had a range of schools participating. As you know, Heritage ESTEM is committed to making environmental differences. We had one school that was considered a zero waste school. And then we had schools that were just started sorting. So I would say obviously our champions were the students that were already familiar with sorting, but everyone did catch on at some point. You know, some took a little bit more education, but I think that everyone by the end did end up catching on. I think teaching students the fundamentals of reuse is really important. I think that's where our world is going. We hear a lot of buzzwords like the circular economy, and I think that these are the jobs that these students are going to see in the next 15 years, you know, 10, 15 years. So becoming familiar with these and just like training your brain to be innovative and think like that, I think is really important for students right now. You know, and then there's obvious that we reduce single-use plastic bag consumption. We replace them. So, you know, that was obvious. We did have some discoveries, and the first we'll talk about is the bag style. So we used a small custom-made reusable bag. I think you saw it on the other slide, the small red bag. And so we had that custom made for like breakfast or lunch size. We now know that a mesh bag will be much more effective in deterring students from keeping trash in the bag and liquids. Obviously, you can't really put liquids into mesh. It will create a pretty big mess. So we think a mesh bag is a better option for the students. Also the return method. So previously we had them returning bags into either a brute style return bin or a cardboard return bin. And again, I think that it just gave students that throwaway mentality of, you know, this is just, you know, this is going into the trash. So we agreed that a rack style return will be, again, a better option for students to just kind of create that awareness and training the brain that this is going to be reused. I'm going to take a little better care of it than just throwing it in the trash like I do all my other trash. And then delivery logistics. So for a district like St. Paul Public Schools, or even you know, a county like Dakota County, to be delivering we're a small company, so be delivering these bags all over and within the time frame that we needed to was difficult. So for larger districts or larger geographic areas, we would like to utilize like a central nutrition services building, something like that, that's already visiting the schools, and that can kind of use that as a drop-off technique for the bag. So moving forward, so this is what school implementation guidelines will look like. So like I said, unfortunately, things got kind of cut a little bit short with COVID. We were discussing district-wide implementation with St. Paul Public Schools, but that, again, that conversation just kind of got cut. So this is what we're looking at now, which is what we'll think will be the best option for schools that are interested. So in order to save costs, there will be a minimum number of students or school participants. Just like anything, you know, usually the more that you have, the lower the cost is for the items. And then the rollouts, excuse me, will happen in groups. So if, you know, if there's 20 schools, we'll roll out with 10, and then we'll roll out with another 10. And then, like I said, pick up and drop off will be based on geographic logistics. So if we can utilize a central nutrition services center, we'll do that. Otherwise, you know, we would have to do that rollout in a geographic location that made sense for us. Then there would be a one-time initial setup cost that would include, that would include the racks, and you know, we like to supply the bags. We don't want that to have to be a burden on you, but that would include the racks. And there's a brood in the back where you know, where you do where we would do our weekly pickup of dirty bags, and then there's a laundered service fee that would be paid monthly. Some just creative kind of things that discussions have brought about in the past would be that local companies or sponsors could help schools pay for a program like this. You know, if you're like St. Paul Public Schools and you are already paying $140,000 a year for, you know, for single use, I would think that this program would, you know, wouldn't exceed that. But again, I know that budgets are tight. So, you know, maybe looking into other companies that would kind of like to sponsor something like this for schools would be a creative way to get this in your particular school. And then I have, speaking of finances, I have another poll question. All right, great. So, you know, the safety of reuse during COVID-19 has also been a pretty hot topic. In fact, even with our school program before COVID-19, we did consider using the reusable breakfast bag for more than one day. So for instance, you know, students would use the same bag for a couple days in a row to save on washing and pickup and all of that. But I think after the, you know, everything with COVID, I don't think that is an option anymore. But let's talk about the safety of reuse during COVID-19. So can COVID-19 spread through surface contact? So the answer is yes, but it is unlikely. So as you can see from my notes here, the CDC has not documented any known cases of transmission through surface contact. And to prevent transmission through objects and surfaces, one can assume that any object in public space, whether it's reusable or disposable, could be contaminated. So, you know, the CDC says that it is mainly spread through respiratory droplets when an infected person sneezes, coughs, or or speaks. So now, yes, if someone coughed on something and then you touched it and then you touched your eye or your nose or your mouth, then, you know, it is possible that the virus could spread. But are disposable products safer than reusable ones? Well, no. You know, the virus remains on different surfaces for varying times. It remains on plastic for a certain amount of time, paper for a certain amount of time, metals for a certain amount of time. So I think that the plastic, you know, plastic companies or the plastic industry really is tried to exploit the virus and promote single-use everything. But now that we, you know, now that we've come 3 or 4 months into it, I think that we realize that as long as proper sanitation is used, it doesn't matter what type of material you are, whether it's reusable or single use, that they are both safe if you take the right precautions. And then, you know, single use causes additional public health concerns once it is discarded. So microplastics are in our water, and they're in our air, and they're in our food. And you know, with a virus that causes respiratory issues, if you couple that with microplastics in the air that we breathe, you know, I think that you're looking at a lot of long-term health issues beyond the virus. And I think that reuse companies and reuse systems really bring to the table a healthier environment for, you know, better health. GOATOTE itself is practicing enhanced cleaning methods since the onset of COVID-19. So we comply with the CDC and the EPA recommendations, and we're also looking into other technologies that will make the virus a non-issue for reusable bags. I think that reuse companies, you have to remember, they also bring about economic and social opportunities. They create jobs in a lot of areas. They save money, and they're long-term sustainable solutions. So, you know, you have things like a pandemic appear, but for our company ourselves, you know, it was actually an opportunity. It really, I don't look at it as something bad. I look at it as something good that happened for us, because it shows that we were ready for this. We are already disinfecting and cleaning bags. We already had anticipated something like this happening, and I think that other reuse companies can shine in moments like this as well. And I also think it brings to light a real sense of community. If students are using these bags in their school and they go to the grocery store and their moms are using these bags, I mean, what I think COVID-19 showed was that all of our choices and our decisions every day can affect the other person. So we need to look at that when it comes to environmental issues as well, that the choices that we are making is affecting our neighbor and our entire community. And that, you know, will hopefully help us to make the right choices and for the environment and for our future. It's inevitable that innovation is going to drive sustainable solutions, especially during this time. And I really just think it's our responsibility to push aside what wasn't working and to bring to light something better, a better option. If you would like more info on implementing GOATOTE in your school or your district or how that works, this is mine and my husband's contact information. And that is.
Thank you, Renee. That was great information. Were there any questions that came in, Jenny?
I got one question. I'm not sure if you directly answered it, so I'll say it anyways. Could schools purchase the bags and launder them on their own? That would help conserve resource utilization from pickup and drop off.
We do not personally sell bags, but if schools wanted to implement the program on their own, then they are more than welcome to. If they feel inspired, to kind of create that program, then that absolutely.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting too in the pilot. You mentioned just the design of the bag, Renee.
Yeah.
But like thinking about like how do we see if it's a reimbursable meal? The bag width has to be a certain width so you can see inside the bag and it's easy for students to open the bag. That mesh factor would also allow it to be able to be seen if it's a reimbursable meal or not. So just, thinking through all of that is really interesting.
Yeah, it definitely was eye-opening. I mean, we had to adjust the handle size of the bags to account for mittens and, just things that you don't really think of, just in the everyday. But yeah, we wanted to make something that, you could see, but the mesh bag would just be a better option overall. Unfortunately, there's less material options when it comes to mesh as far as sustainable material options. For instance, like our bag was made from 80% post-consumer material and could be recycled and reused. You need, with the mesh, it gets a little bit more tricky, but it's out there. There are good materials.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So if anybody's like watching the clock like me, I know we're running a little bit behind, which is anticipated. So that's why the last part of the workshop is all me on resources. And so don't worry about running out of time. We will get to everything. But I want to jump in right now and briefly just discuss ways schools can successfully collect breakfast and lunch waste outside of the cafeteria, as it's a very likely possibility more schools will be moving this direction with COVID-19. So first I want to start with a poll. Does your school or district currently serve meals in the classroom? Okay, so the majority of schools do currently serve meals in the classroom. So this will be useful. So when food is served inside the cafeteria, we know that containers already exist for all the streams. So including containers that don't maybe exist in the classroom, such as liquids, collection containers, organics, or food share tables. So for schools, the majority of liquids are coming from milk cartons. So anywhere milk cartons are being used, it's necessary to collect those liquids. And it's a best practice across all school programs to capture liquids first, then recycling, trash, and organics in that specific order. And in the cafeteria, most schools use a 5-gallon bucket with a strainer for liquids collection, either propped up in various ways, as you can see on this slide. Might be on a stainless sorting table, a milk crate, or sitting on a brute. Our 20-gallon brute for liquids collection still works well for some schools, but several benefits schools have experienced with the 5-gallon bucket is the ability to stay in the cafeteria, not wheel it to a floor drain or another area because they're able to use that kitchen sink, and the ability to more easily clean that smaller container, as well as dumping into that sink drain with a disposal, and less of an issue with the clogged and smelly floor drains if those aren't used as frequently. Some schools have older pipes, and that's more of an issue. Some don't. Some schools use a dishwasher to clean buckets. But I also wanted to note that some schools have reported that the harder plastic holds on to odor less than the flexible plastic of brutes. So that's unproven, but it's been shared with me. And eating in the cafeteria also, as we know, allows for easier bulk service, which may not be as much of a factor with COVID-19, but a great benefit to bulk service is the reduction of individually packaged items, which oftentimes create more waste, as well as allowing students to choose options which they will eat and reducing food waste. So the state guidelines, as we know, in current COVID-19 times, they state for food service, if social distancing is not possible in the cafeteria, meals have to be delivered to the classroom, or students have to bring food from the cafeteria back to their classrooms to eat. They want schools to discontinue self-service food and beverage distribution in the cafeteria, and meals, snacks, and beverages served must be individually packaged wherever possible. And where it's not possible, food and beverages must be served directly to students. And to handle non-disposable food service items minimally and wash them with hot water, soap, and a dishwasher. So with these COVID-19 state guidelines, eating in the cafeteria may be more limited, as it may not be possible to maintain social distancing or not have enough time for all students to do so. So bulk service will need to be adjusted from students serving themselves to food service staff serving students or individually packaged meals. As students begin to eat more outside of the cafeteria, they may need to get creative on how liquids, recyclables, organics, and share table items are captured, if share tables are allowed, as meals served outside the cafeteria require creative thinking. So I know this is where we've been, and I want to talk about where we're going and why capturing liquids is important. So when we're serving those meals outside the cafeteria, it's really important to first consider how liquids will be captured. And that's important because liquids contaminate recycling at recycling facilities, making paper unusable and restricts containers from being sorted properly due to their weight because they're filled with liquids. It also creates an issue for collection because liquid heavy bags cause lifting safety issues, tear bags, and result in messes and wasted resources, as well as dirtying containers, which might especially be a problem if you aren't lining those containers, or hope not to line them in those low use areas or not every classroom. So due to this, recyclables must be empty, but think about if does your school have a liquids disposal plan outside of the cafeteria? And in your plan, you'll want to consider where will liquids be emptied. So once you consider where you will empty liquids, it'll help determine the style of liquids collection container you need. Will the container need to be on wheels? Will it be light enough to lift? If it's dumped in a sink for the classroom, you have to ensure that all classrooms have sinks, and staff will need to consistently remind students to empty their cartons. Some schools have policies actually that restrict the use of classroom sinks for dumping milk due to old pipes and the potential clogging or smell. So you may also need to implement a practice of having water run to discourage that calcium buildup on the sink pipes, which results in clogs, and discussing that with your building supervisor if it's a possibility. Another thing to consider is if it's easy to clean, that liquids collection container. Several schools prefer to run those through the dishwasher, so considering how they can stay clean can help determine the size and preference of this container type. And for some schools, it may be necessary to be able to weigh the container for measurement purposes. That could be considered as well. It's also beneficial to encourage students to drink up their milk and provide choice in taking a milk only if they're going to drink it. It's not a requirement to take a milk. When making adjustments to meal service, it's worth considering if the new system you're providing is allowing students a choice in taking a milk to reduce waste. And then some of these major liquids collection best practices are outlined here. We use the color yellow for liquids collection in Dakota County. Our new school labels include empty liquids, no food. You'll see that on the bottom of the recycling labels as a reminder. And you can also see examples of our liquids collection labels that are available to any school for free to put directly on the container. The drop is our 3x3 size, and the pouring of the milk carton is our 8.5x11 and 5x14 size. So at your school, students may already be eating breakfast outside the cafeteria, but you might not have a great system for collecting recyclables or liquids. So now is a great opportunity to update that collection system, because typically when we've completed waste sorts in schools, the breakfast in the classroom programs have more recycling contamination. And the majority of schools' breakfast in the classroom programs I've seen now are using a large trash brute in the hallway to collect all materials, and those all end up in the trash. Another model is asking students to use classroom containers to sort breakfast waste. But for both models, unless students have a classroom sink or container to dump liquids into or are encouraged and allowed to do so, milk cartons either end up in the trash or they contaminate the recycling with the liquids. So containers outside the cafeteria might not exist right now for liquids or organics. And also thinking about food share. But as meals may not have been eaten in the classroom previously or not as many, we'll need to plan for more ways to keep recycling free of liquids and other contamination. Also, as food's more prepackaged with COVID-19, we'll also need to plan for an increase in waste generation and more uneaten food and single-use packaging like bags, utensils, and wrappers. You want to also consider in the past how big of a role your cafeteria monitor played in assisting students to sort in the cafeteria, and thinking through how assistance or education will be provided for sorting to students. Will that be through a video? Will there be student meal breakfast captains or staff at social distancing space? I don't know what that looks like. But I want to have Paul with Pinecrest Elementary share some insights with you here. So Pinecrest Elementary recently participated in our Dakota County school recycling program to improve recycling and help students form better waste management practices. So Principal Paul Baker is here from Hastings, Pinecrest Elementary, to share a little bit about their new system they recently implemented for breakfast in the classroom collection that provides a way to collect waste outside the classroom and might give your school a little bit of insight on how it might work well for you too. And Paul's been a principal at Pinecrest for the last 6 years. So let's welcome Paul.
Good morning. So a lot of what Allie said really went into the decisions we made with Allie's help. After our audit, we recognized that we had that challenge of our classroom bins getting both contaminated, the recycling and liquid waste getting into the trash bins. And we also did not want our sinks being used for liquids. And so we came up with a creative solution where we're using a smaller, a 2-gallon pail inside of the trash bin. And so we have about 20 to 40% of our students each day eating breakfast in the classrooms. And at the end of that time, students just walk out into the hall, and we have 4 stations like what you see here, where students then can come out and do their sorting, dumping their liquids and any uneaten cereal into the liquid bin. I know one of the challenges we had at first was thinking, is a 2-gallon pail going to be big enough for a whole grade level? And it really has worked out well. So we've never had a situation where that bin is getting overfilled. And so that was good to see. I really see the portability of this setup as a huge factor that's going to help us support eating lunches in our classrooms as well here this fall. And just wheeling those down to different areas where currently we just wheel that down in the morning, and we have one in each of the 4 corners of our building. But I could see this year having 2 at each area where we're eating breakfast and being able to replicate much of what we're doing in our cafeteria. One of the important things as we transitioned to this was to really help students change their habits. Like we know so much of recycling is changing our habits and our routines. And so I incorporated this message into the morning announcements quite frequently at the beginning, and then made sure to remind students at various points of the year. And one of the fun things that we did was we made a video, and we show this video at the beginning of the school year and then throughout the year as well, to really help kids take ownership. We want kids to own this. We want kids to understand the importance of it. If they buy into it, we know then that's a huge factor and a huge step forward. So we'll take a look. Here's the video that we share with all of our students.
Breakfast is an important way to fuel your body for a full day of learning. We want you to eat all your breakfasts and drink all your milk to reduce food waste.
Pinecrest students are upgrading their breakfast waste game with new containers and procedures. We will not be putting breakfast waste in classroom garbage cans. Instead, students will safely walk their refuse to the clearly labeled recycling, garbage, and liquids containers, conveniently located in each wing of the school. We want you to finish all your cereal and milk. But if you're unable to do that, please pour the remainder of your cereal and milk into the liquids bin. Hold your milk carton inside the bin before pouring it out. When your milk carton is empty, place it in the recycling container. Cereal bowls, with the cover removed, should also go in the recycling bin. All of the other components of your breakfast should be placed in the trash container. This includes any cereal tops, wrappers, boxes, even the paper container goes in the trash. Once you've properly disposed of your waste, return to class and quietly join your peers.
So that system has really helped us, get that waste out of the classrooms, help kids take some ownership, and we found it very successful. I'm thankful that we have it in place heading into this year.
Yes, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Paul. I think it's just genius, this type of system that is getting waste out of the classroom. And it's really interesting too that with this type of system, it can be adapted. So you can one trash isn't enough. You could add another trash on the other side of the recycling. Those dollies hook together. So that's a solution for that. Or if you have organics at your school, you could even hook an organics container to the system as well. So it's really adaptable, and that's just great that it's working well for your school.
It's pretty easy for our custodian to be able to then wheel it down the hall and get it into the bin outside pretty easily as well.
Right. And it's nice too that the liquids is in the trash. So if liquids do spill, it goes in the trash container where they were going already. So yeah, and it's really nice. I think I've heard a few from just 2 pilot schools that are going to be implementing this year. You're thinking through, like, do we need a strainer on this type of container? And it's really just small enough that you really can't put anything else in it. Or it's really obvious if something's in there. So I'm not aware that they make a strainer for this size liquids bin, but it was initially intended for like a side saddle trash, but it's working really well for liquids collection, I think.
And then our custodian just takes that to the kitchen and it goes down the garbage disposal.
Yeah, that's so great. Yep. Thank you for sharing, Paul. And so based on just that variation of the Pinecrest pilot project, if your school has a pod structure, it can be adapted for school pods with similar benefits. Those similar benefits could include reducing classroom contamination, getting food waste out of classroom bins, which teachers really appreciate, and keeping liquids out of the classroom sinks and recycling. So 2 schools in our current program are implementing this same system that Paul discussed, but are adapting it a little bit for their needs. So Kaposia Education Center in South St. Paul, they're varying the method slightly by upgrading their current hallway brute trash containers to that style that you saw in the previous slide, the skinny 23-gallon trash, because that size container is the one that fits the liquids. But they're actually not using the dollies, as they had containers that stayed in their pod locations all day already. So instead, they're just leaving the dollies off. They don't need to be wheeled away after breakfast, and custodial staff will just remove the liquids containers after breakfast or any meal using a 20-gallon liquids brute on wheels and replacing the liquids containers before the next day. So that's another way to do things. Heritage East End Magnet School in West St. Paul, I know Marcy's here. They've also varied the model by adding a separate organics container for food scraps collection in pod areas, as well as collecting the plastic bags from breakfast. So they're recycling those plastic bags separately through the Trex plastic bag recycling program. And that system could be rolled into each pod and rolled out after breakfast is over, or could stay throughout the whole day. So I'm happy to share container purchasing information with you if you're looking to try a similar system for your school. And there might be other creative ways to collect liquids outside the classroom too that I would love to learn about. So please share those with me if you're doing something else. So if centralized hallway or pod collection won't work for your school, classroom collection may be the only option. It does present challenges for liquids collection unless students are allowed to pour liquids down classroom sinks, and every classroom may not have a sink. So if your school is looking to continue organics collection containers in classrooms reinforces that sorting for students, as they have all the options available each and every time. But it does require much more education to ensure organics stays clean. And lining every classroom organics container with a compostable bag uses a lot of compostable bags, and it gets expensive. So there's other models that schools can do to save money on those compostable bags and unlined containers. Visitation School in Mendota Heights use that 7.5 gallon white tote bin that's pictured here in their preschool classrooms to collect food waste. The bins were then placed on a cart that was already used to deliver food to classrooms and brought back to the cafeteria kitchen to be placed in their organics container. And then the bins were washed in the dishwasher. This way, the organics containers in the classroom weren't necessary. and bags weren't used in these tote bins, so they didn't have to use any additional bags. Pine Bend Elementary in Invergrove Heights also used that tote bin for their kindergarten rooms in a similar way, but they're going to be trialing that green bucket collection system. It's a 2-gallon bin with handles that's pictured as well for their 3rd through 5th grade classrooms this year through the school recycling program. That model was originally from Lyndale Community School in Minneapolis that used them in classrooms and placed them in the hallway when they are ready to be emptied. So with students collecting the bins and emptying it into the cafeteria organics barrel, though this process likely will now need to be adapted with COVID-19. But those bins were washed on a weekly basis, and they collected approximately 50 pounds of food per week from their classrooms. So a share table is an area for students to place unopened packaged items from school meal service, not from home, such as granola bars, chip bags, whole fruit with a peel intact, such as apples, bananas, or oranges, and string cheese and milk with a temperature control in place. So schools are allowed to reserve items from the share table at the next meal service, but it's also possible to redistribute food to students in other ways or an outside organization. So share table rules must be clearly shared and communicated to students and staff. And I know share tables operating in a similar way as they have been will likely not be possible this school year with COVID-19, with students taking directly from the share table. But it's important to consider if other models are possible for sharing or redistributing food, as schools will likely need to move in a direction towards more individually packaged items or meals. There's maybe going to be more items that the students may not eat if all the meals are standardized. And there also may be more that's able to be shared if it's a packaged and sealed item, though it will likely need to be disinfected. So what will students be instructed to do with this food would be something to think about. Our original models for sharing on the upper top 2 pictures. So the one on the left is a sharing cart that holds food service size pans that can be chilled and is being used by this year's current grantees, as well as a model we originally piloted with our wasted food prevention project in schools on the upper right. But there are other models that you can use for sharing food outside of just a traditional share table. So Heritage East End Magnet School piloted a method where perishable items not taken by students during lunch on the share table are brought to the family support workers mini refrigerator in their office. And then they're given to students who get hungry throughout the day instead of buying brand new food, which they were previously doing for these students. It also allowed students to get food more discreetly. And working to get this food home to students and families by using the cooler, those black cooler bags pictured, and placing that in student lockers on Fridays to bring home for the weekend, allowing students to get more maybe fresh, non-packaged meals. So that 7.5 gallon tote bin, that green tote bin that's pictured that was used for visitation organics collection might also be an idea to use for classroom or hallway share tables, paired with a cart similarly to that pod share table pictured and brought back to a central location for sanitizing and distribution. Dakota County has share table signs that can be customized by request, and obviously we're going to need to follow state guidelines with all of this, but these are ideas and ways to think outside the box a little bit on how food might be able to be shared going forward. And District 191, so Burnsville, Egan, Savage schools, even pre-COVID, doesn't allow students to take directly from the share table. Only staff are allowed to handle food placed on the share table. And then staff is able to clean and sanitize the food and redistribute it through school staff or other after-school programs. This model differs from typical share tables because students aren't allowed to take food during lunchtime, as it's the property of the food service department until it's deemed it's safe for secondary consumption, or they wash the items or determine otherwise. It also differs in the sense that students actually needed to decide at the point of sale if they didn't want the food service item, instead of at any time during or after the lunch period's over. So there's an organization known as the Food Bus Program as well to donate, that collects food for food share or food shelves. And a partnership with a local food shelf might be something to consider to donate your food if repurposing it or giving it back to students is just not safe or feasible. As an alternative for kind of not having that food go in the trash or wasting that food, if that's allowed. Perhaps the overall amount of food donated to those outside organizations could be tracked and shared with students and families in the district as well. It's important to develop a program that works for your school or district following state guidelines, and to update your policies for share tables and student protocol for food safety. But I just wanted to share these ideas with you, as there might be outside the box solutions to capture that uneaten, unopened food that we haven't done before. And I'm newly being introduced to the world of food delivery, and with COVID-19, there are even more limitations, but I wanted to just share a few models quickly. Hauling disposal costs for trash, as we know, are more expensive than recycling. So trash is taxed at 17%, recycling and organics are not. So if you're reducing waste, you can help keep your costs lower and keep less out of the trash. So considering how meals will be distributed to the classrooms, or how students will get these meals, and what waste this distribution will generate is important. To include waste in the planning process also might reduce the waste generated, but also have the ability to significantly reduce your costs both on the hauling side and the purchasing side. So AFWOS Leadership Academy in Hennepin County replaced their single-use cardboard boxes they were using with reusable plastic baskets to serve to-go breakfast. So previously, students would get their breakfast items in an individual cardboard container, and as a school, they were using approximately 600 containers per day just for breakfast. These previously cost $312 a month, and they are on containers that are used once and thrown away. But one purchase of the reusable baskets for $417 covered them for the entire school year. So that provided a significant cost savings and also reduced waste. Students previously collected the baskets at the end of breakfast and brought them back to the kitchen. Though with COVID-19 concerns, this process could be adjusted to return baskets in another way, maybe in a hallway cart handled only by staff. If paper boats are currently being used, can your school make the switch to reusable baskets that are dishwasher safe and are therefore sanitized? If meals will be eaten in classrooms, do they need to be prepackaged and delivered in boxes? Or is it allowable or feasible for students' meals to be served in bulk by one staff member in the classroom, or on individual trays that could be returned on a cart to the cafeteria? Are there menus with simple food choices that reduce the amount of packaging waste required and therefore waste generated, such as whole fruit, also saving on costs? Or perhaps recyclable packaging can be used, for example, aluminum foil instead of a plastic bag for wrapping, or otherwise. Your food vendor may also be familiar with other packaging alternatives. So just posing some questions to think about, what are some solutions to single-use plastics, such as washable containers, safe bulk service, and simple foods which have little to no packaging that makes sense. And if you're using a hallway or pod collection model for your breakfast or lunch waste, it might be more feasible to collect reusable utensils, bowls, or baskets versus meals disposed of or dealt with in individual classrooms. And then for students bringing lunch from home, can you encourage them to reuse a reusable container or pack a low waste lunch? So lastly, another consideration is just ensuring all containers have contactless container lids. Consider upgrading your organics container lids that require touching to a step-on container in staff areas. Your recycling lid should already have a hole or Saturn shape, and trash can be a swing lid or an open lid to kind of alleviate the need to be disinfecting lids frequently. So let's continue working together and thinking outside the box to reduce waste and stay safe. Are there questions for Paul or I before we head into our breakout groups?
Nothing in the chat. Kim just says forgot if it was you or Paul talking about breakfast waste in the classroom. Kim says, yes, breakfast waste fills the smaller classroom containers so quickly.
Yeah. No, that's great. And maybe this would be a viable solution. And it can help save on bags too if, you're consolidating all your waste is always better when you're able to deal with it all at once instead of in each room, going room to room. So, good comment. Okay, so let's head into our breakout room time. So how this is going to work, there's 3 breakout rooms that are split up by your role. So I had your roles in advance, and there'll be food service in one room, buildings and maintenance in one room, and administration and teachers in another room. So remember, you're going to quickly introduce yourself the first time you start speaking, because nobody maybe knows who each other are, and just saying your name and maybe what school you're with so we can get to know one another. But we have approximately 10 to 15 minutes to discuss each question of the 2 questions. There is going to be a recorder in each room, and the recorder will take notes and just let you know when it's time to move on to the next question. And then in the last 2 minutes, we're going to ask your group to just choose one highlight or favorite idea that came out of your discussion and designate someone in your room to share with the larger group when we come back together. So you'll all be notified when breakout rooms are ending with a countdown clock. So our 2 questions we're going to be discussing in our breakout rooms are, what waste reduction and recycling barriers or challenges do you foresee as you consider program delivery in the fall? So examples to that might be, how are we going to collect liquids, packaging waste concerns, reduced ability to assist students with sorting waste. So focusing on what waste reduction and recycling barriers look like. And then the second question will be, what potential solutions, ideas, or program adaptations are you considering to address those barriers and challenges to deliver services in the safest way possible for both students and staff in your building? So, and then again, last 2 minutes, we'll just have somebody share with the larger group when we come back together. I think Jenny's going to break us out, and I already have everybody ready to go. So have a great discussion and see you back in 25 or 30 minutes.
I do have a question. I have a phone number of someone calling in, so I don't have that name. It's the phone number that ends in 415. So if you could tell me who you are, and I can put you in the right room.
Yeah. And Jenny will be back in the main room too, so just maybe put that in the chat. If they're on the phone, can they put it in the chat?
Maybe
they can unmute themselves.
Yeah. Okay, I'm breaking all of you up.
Okay.
Oh, Megan, I didn't get you. Okay.
Allie's position there in Washington County in the East Metro. So in our breakout session, we talked about a couple different issues that we foresee just in the fall, just with planning. We don't know what the state recommendations are, so it's hard to have plans set in stone, and it's hard to commit to moving forward with a certain plan when we don't know exactly what the recommendations will be. Also, we just talked about different sorting issues and also sanitation issues, whether there will be time to sanitize all the different stations, what hallways will look like, how to keep mess maintained, and what that might look like even with a hybrid schedule.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to share from our teachers administration group?
Teacher or administration?
Yeah, so I think we combined them.
Oh.
So
okay. So the one I was in. Did anybody in my group want to share, or else I can? Okay, I can go. So this is just talking through number 1, right, Allie?
Yeah, just one thing. It doesn't have to be one question or the other, just to highlight that you'd like to bring back to the group.
We talked a lot about breakfast in the classroom and just like lunch periods. So the barriers we foresee in the fall is just having, there's already like a lack of support regarding waste and recycling. And so continuing on with COVID issues, having waste and recycling being even less of a priority because there's safety requirements for children this fall.
Right, thank you. And then food service, I was in that group. Did anybody from my group want to share anything that we talked about? Well, I can just mention that really innovative idea, at least for me, was there's some districts that are considering using a reusable clamshell. So made of a translucent plastic that can go through the dishwasher potentially. So maybe having some sort of reuse incorporated into food or meal delivery is being thought through, as well as maybe a craft paper box as an alternative as well. So that was an aha moment for me. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for participating in those breakout sessions. I hope it's useful to hear from people maybe struggling with some of the same things you are. And now kind of just lastly, as we're wrapping up, I want to make sure we get to our next presentation. So I'm going to be sharing my screen here. I don't know. Give me 1 second. Oh, here we go. Okay. Can everyone see Lakeville Area Schools reuse?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, sounds great. So I just, as we're jumping forward, I'd like to just discuss this really briefly. All buildings end up with items they no longer need or want. Maybe you finally recently had time to pull some of those items together during COVID-19. But what happens to those items in your school besides ending up in a back storage room for a while? Is there a process to reuse or sell items, or do they end up in the trash? So Lakeville Area Schools in Dakota County has a policy that ensures all items are first offered to other schools in the district, posted on public surplus, and as a last option recycled or disposed of properly. So Dan Powers, who's the custodial and ground supervisor with the district, has graciously provided information related to the process to share with you today to help your school reduce waste, free up storage space, and potentially save money in the process. So a quick poll: what does your school or district do with usable items that are no longer needed? Just select which one or all that apply for this question.
Okay, we're about 60% here.
Sounds great.
Okay, no new votes have come in, so I'll end it there. Oh, one more just came in.
Okay, so we're split here. Most people aren't sure, but maybe some schools post on an auction website for reuse or recycle if possible. Great. So Lakeville Area Schools is made up of 18 district-owned buildings, including 8 elementaries, 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, an area learning center, 2 community education facilities, and a district office and maintenance shop with approximately 11,000 students. And reuse has even greater environmental benefits than recycling, because reuse eliminates the need to create a new product and just using a material again that you already have. So Lakeville Area Schools has developed a Google spreadsheet system as a simple way to post and track items they no longer want or need. So all staff in their district are given access to the Google spreadsheet, including teachers, office managers, principals, and have a chance to ask for these items. And their goal is to ensure items have the ability to be reused rather than thrown in the trash, while also saving money by reducing recycling and disposal costs, as well as reducing the need to purchase new things. So when a school determines they no longer want or need an item, they email a photo of the item to the Buildings and Grounds Department at the district, and they post that on the reuse spreadsheet for all school staff to view. The school spreadsheet, or the spreadsheet, also includes a photo of the item available, as you can see on the slide. This is a screenshot of the spreadsheet itself. It has the photo, the location of the item, for example, the school it's located in, its current status, also supplemented by key color, and the last day the item will be available to claim before it goes on the public auction website to sell. As the key indicates, items listed in green are still available. Those in yellow have some of the items still available, which means the quantity was more than one. Orange means the items have been claimed by another school already and not available. And purple means the items have gone to public auction. And the district uses the website publicsurplus.com to sell their items. So once these items have been posted, they typically stay green or available for 2 weeks before being listed on the public surplus website. And schools typically coordinate with office managers for delivery. And when the district lists items on public surplus, it's typically for 7 days, with more expensive items being listed for 14 days. So using this process to prioritize reuse over disposal, the district has had some fantastic results. At least half of all the items get claimed by another school and reused in the district, not even sent to the public surplus auction site. The district has sold 75% of remaining items they've posted to the auction website. And then items that are not reused or purchased through public surplus are either listed again on public surplus, depending on the item. Recycled, for example, metal desks and filing cabinets are scrapped with a metal recycling company. Electronics go to electronics recycler. And disposal is the absolute last resort. And Dan also stated what helps for them is just the simplicity of the whole system. And Lakeville area public schools hasn't incorporated donation into their process at this time, but if items aren't wanted by another school or don't sell on public surplus, it's also a possibility prior to recycling or disposal. Donating materials and equipment that's usable and in good working condition is another way to reuse and saves resources and money, as you're not paying to dispose of the item. Public schools are allowed to donate to other public entities, so other public schools or city or county owned buildings. And private schools have flexibility in donating to public or private entities. So also if transportation is an issue, entities may offer to pick up the materials as well. And schools may also want to consider purchasing used items from these same organizations to save money. So thanks. Any questions? Dan Powers is willing and able to answer more detailed questions on their process or share how it works. And you have my contact information already in a few different places. So thanks so much. Any questions briefly on that before I jump into our last presentation on resources? Okay, I'm not seeing anything come through, so I am going to move to our last presentation. Okay, so I look forward to sharing some Dakota County resources we have to assist your school in reducing waste and improving recycling. I'm going to share a few of those with you right now. So Dakota County offers free labels, posters, and activity guides to help school staff and students know what materials can be recycled or collected for organics. We now have a new label design updated to make labels cleaner and simpler, and it emphasizes food scraps for organics and paper and cardboard, cartons, cans, glass, and plastics for recycling. There are various sizes of labels, and then there's 17 by 11 large dumpster labels as well. So as haulers are increasing fees for contamination, now is the time more than ever to keep your recycling clean, and these resources and labels can help you do so. We also have posters and activity guides, and there's multiple versions depending on if your school collects organics. Our 18 by 24 inch posters are great to hang in cafeterias, hallways, or staff lounges. Some schools even hang one in every classroom to reference or quiz students at the start of each semester. The poster is soon going to be updated to match our new label design. And activity guides come in K through 2, 3 through 5, and 6 through 8 grade versions. And all these materials are available for all Dakota County schools for free and are easy to order on our online school order form on our school recycling webpage. And after you place your order, the items will be shipped directly to your school at no cost to you and serve as reminders just on how to properly recycle, reduce confusion by students and staff, and just improve your school recycling overall. Our recycling guides provide best practice recommendations for custodial, food service, classrooms, and wasted food prevention to improve recycling and reduce waste by area. So there's multiple versions of the custodial and food service guide depending on if your school has organics collection. These are also available on our website. Cafeteria banners are available for free by request for liquids, recycling, trash, and organics, and are made with vinyl and have grommet holes for hanging, size 2 feet by 3 feet. But you can also put them on the wall as shown. If your school's interested in better signage, but the sizing listed here doesn't work for your needs, we can work with you on a different size or type of signage. So please reach out to me. Portable recycling organics and trash containers are available to check out and borrow for free. And these are typically used for outdoor events, which there may be more taking place now to avoid large groups of people gathering indoors. These containers come with lids, bags, and other resources. As you'll see, the recycling container is an example of what they look like on the slide. And other resources might be grabbers to pull out contaminants or scales to weigh bags and materials collected. Education kits can include display materials, including tabletop props and banners, interactive activities such as our recycling wheel or spray bottles, and ingredients to make your own green cleaners, print resources such as handouts, and promotional materials including pencils made of blue jeans on the topics of reducing waste, toxicity reduction, recycling, organics, hazardous waste, and preventing wasted food. We're also working to develop more virtual educational resources, including articles, images, and social media posts for your school's use, as we realize handouts and in-person displays in education likely won't be that much in use for this school year. And a contactless online checkout system is in development and coming soon for both these portable recycling containers and education kits. In addition, we still have waste sort materials available to borrow, including gloves, bins, forms, scales, and signage, if your school plans to do its own waste sort, as well as school reuse and clean out day assistance bins for collection, signage, and scales to weigh materials. These bins for reusable materials are placed next to recycling and trash containers, and Pine Bend Elementary collected almost 148 pounds of reusable material and 104 pounds of recyclable materials during their clean out in 2019. Though performances and field trips are currently postponed until further notice, I want to just share this exciting new opportunity with you. So Dakota County provides waste education for schools to enhance student and staff recycling knowledge with free recycling education performances and free field trip busing service to approved recycling, composting, and land disposal destinations. Schools may submit request forms once per school year for each opportunity. The performances are done through Trisha and the Toonies and their interactive experiences with puppet characters and music to inspire K-3 students to reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink their actions. We're partnering with Trisha to create a video for students using puppets on what goes where in these COVID-19 times. Field trip busing allows students and staff to visit facilities where recycling, organics, and trash materials end up, and to see equipment and technology in action, learn about what happens to these materials, and also develop a closer connection to how their actions actually matter. So busing is available for all 4th grade students, green team students in 5th grade and above, adult chaperones, and school staff once per school year. So to qualify for either a performance or field trip, schools must meet recycling best practices, which means paired containers and color-coded labels throughout the interior of the building unless the school is a current participant in our school grant program. And we really want to assist you in meeting these best practices so it's not a barrier to receiving this education. So if you have a question on that, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. And that leads into our school waste prevention and recycling grant program. So we know nearly 80% of school waste is recyclable or compostable, and we want to be able to provide direct assistance to help schools reduce waste and recycle more. So grants are available to public and private schools in Dakota County to start or improve waste management practices. Up to $10,000 per school building per school year are given for resources to increase reuse, recycling, food waste prevention, and organics collection projects. So eligible expenses might include things like indoor and outdoor containers for recycling, reusable serviceware, including trays, utensils, cups, bowls, and boats to replace disposable serviceware, share tables and other wasted food prevention infrastructure, dishwashing equipment stipends, staff stipends, refrigerator, freezers, and bulk food and liquid containers, such as milk or condiments, and student and staff education. And that's just a few of the things that are possible. There's more, so please, if you have an idea to reduce waste or recycle more, reach out. Comprehensive technical assistance is provided through the program, and grant applications are accepted on a first-come, first-served basis. You can contact school recycling at co.dakota.mn.us on our website for more information or to be placed on our waiting list when applications become available. If you're not already receiving our school e-news, I highly recommend signing up online. It was started in 2017 and it's only sent 4 times per year. It contains information, tips, and tricks for schools to reduce waste and recycle right. I've been partnering with our Water Resources Department to include one water-related article in each e-news. So there's always that. And then there's also a Schools in the Spotlight section where your school or district can get recognition for other innovative projects that you might be doing. So in the past, we highlighted Pinecrest Elementary, their hallway liquids collection system that was shared with you today. And I can only highlight what I know about. So if you have interesting, innovative waste reduction or recycling projects happening at your school, please share those with me and I'd be happy to highlight you in a Schools in the Spotlight. And lastly, our webpage is being updated this month to include even more exciting information and resources, but already includes all of these items, including more information on our grant program, ordinance requirements that was discussed by John earlier, our waste education, our online order form for resources, and our school workshop presentations will be listed there as well. So we did it, we made it. I want to know if anyone has questions. Remember, recycling isn't sorted out of the trash. So there's this misconception floating around that trash and recycling can be put in the same container and it will later be sorted. That is false. So it's really important to think before you throw and make sure you're recycling right because it goes somewhere. It's not just out of sight, out of mind. And the actions we take every day are important, and reducing waste and recycling right is good for everyone. So help is available to do so if you need it. And thanks so much for joining us at our school recycling workshop, our 6th annual this year. There'll be a 2-minute survey that's sent to you this week to get your feedback to improve future workshops. And if you'd like CEU credits or continuing education credits, please reach out to me. Again, there are 3 clock hours available through the Minnesota Board of School Administrators and 1 clock hour available through the School Nutrition Association. So I'm happy to email them upon request. Any questions? Oh, and lastly, these are my 2 dogs. I know I told you at the beginning of the workshop that I would share them with you. Leo's on the left and Zeke's on the right. And last year at our school workshop, I know I shared a picture of Zeke, but I only had Zeke at that time to show you. So now you get to see the new addition. And I'm happy to answer any questions before we go if anyone has them. Questions? It looks like I haven't had any come through so far, but all of our workshop presentations will be posted. So if you have one that comes to you after reviewing the presentations we've been through today, feel free to always reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions at any time.